Hello, and welcome back to the Potential of Invasives, an artist's guide for ethical foraging. I'm super excited because now that we have gathered the materials needed, I can actually begin the experiments. So the experiment that I want to start with is I want to attempt using the leaves of the mulberry plant to dye some fabric. In my case, I'm going to be using a couple socks. I've got about 4 here. Before I do that, I want to go over the list of items that we'll be using, as well as some prep work that's important to do before you get started. Okay, so I'm just going to go across here and talk about each item and what it's going to do for us. So the first item is going to be alum powder. So alum is a salt that is going to help the dye from the mulberry leaf bind to the fabric that we're working with. The next item that I'm going to talk about is this. So this is a digital scale. I'm going to say that this is optional. I typically will eyeball how much dye stuffs I use versus how much fabric I'm dyeing. But some people swear that there is a ratio of you want about an equal weight of dye stuff to what you're dyeing. And so I'm going to be using a scale for my experiment just so that I am adhering to that. Next, you're going to want a pretty decent amount of mulberry leaves. I just have this on the table right here. In fact, I do have a full 5-gallon bucket here of mulberry leaves. So I have quite a lot. They are very green. They smell a little bit like leaves. I mean, they smell exactly what you would expect fallen leaves to smell like. The next item that I have is the socks that I'm going to be dyeing, and the important thing about the socks is that I have opted for socks that are 80% cotton. And the reason I've done that is because we're going to need a natural plant fiber in order to get the dye to adhere to it. If I were to use something like rayon, it might stain it slightly, but it's going to be a pretty ephemeral dye, or it just might not stick at all. Typically, the processes that bind dyes to synthetic fibers are much different to the processes that dye them to natural fibers. And so we're going to be using natural fibers today, along with alum salts, and those two play nicely together. Next, I've got a hot plate as well as a rather large cooking pot. And when I say cooking pot, I should stress that if you use a pot for creative purposes or making a batch of dye, you should never use that pot ever again for food purposes, and you should just assume that it's not food safe anymore. So this is a pot that I only use for dye, and so I do not eat out of it. I do not cook anything edible in it. It's just for dye. So I've got that. And that's just about all you're gonna need. Now for prep work, I took all of the leaves off of the branch, and that was a small amount of time. The next thing that you're gonna wanna do is when you take your fabric out, whether you thrifted like a shirt that you're looking to dye or something, you're going to want to wash it beforehand, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to soak these overnight in a solution of water and alum, and I will put that together in just a minute. And the idea is that these will be completely saturated with alum water when we go to put them into the dye tomorrow. So I don't measure the specific amount, but I do tend to be pretty liberal with it. So I will take just a regular plastic spoon. And I'll get 1, 2, 3, spoonfuls. And then I'm going to stir it in. Spoon coming. I'm just waiting to see it all dissolved. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So now I'm just going to set the socks in. And then what I like to do is I sort of give them like a little massage just to really start the process of this solution penetrating those fibers. Okay, that looks good. All right. So I will leave this overnight and we will come back tomorrow and we will actually get to making our dye bath. All right, so we're back the next day. I've drained the socks that I soaked overnight and they're setting still damp, unrinsed, off to the side, ready for us to put them into the dye bath. In the meantime, I'm actually going to get started making the dye bath. So the dry weight of the socks was about 80 grams. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna measure out about 80 grams of leaves on my scale, and that's how many leaves I'm gonna use to make the dye bath. So I'm just gonna go ahead and turn on my scale, zero it out, and I've got the pot just right here. And so I've got my small amount that I had on the table yesterday. This is gonna be nowhere close to 80 grams. That's about 3. And then I do have my large bucket right here. So I'm just going to start piling them in. We're at 12. All right, so this is about 80. I've got 79, but I think I'm gonna call it there. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and turn my scale off now. Set it off to the side. And I'm going to just sort of tamp this down. Because they set so loose, so I'm just gonna sort of compact everything. And then I'll show you guys on the main camera here. This pot is about half full with leaves. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go to the faucet and I am going to fill this pot half full, and so that I have everything completely submerged. That's what I'm aiming for. So what we have is it's about half full. The size of the pot, I think the bigger the better when you're doing dye baths, just so that you have the room to cook everything. And I'm gonna go ahead and turn my hot plate on. I'm gonna be aiming for a medium heat in order to get it going. And the reason that I'm aiming for a medium heat is because high heat does tend to sort of degrade things pretty fast. And so because I'm not sure how stable the dye that I make from this is, I'm going to avoid cooking it on high heat because I want to preserve whatever color I can get from these leaves. So I'm just going to be a little bit conservative with my heat. Okay, so we've got this going. I'm going to leave it run for a while. and I will check back with you guys periodically, and we will see what we get from this. All right. All right, so this is just a quick check-in. It's looking pretty good so far. Starting to get a little bit of color in the water. It's looking a little bit like tea, which is what we're looking for. So I think I'm gonna leave it for another hour, and then we might be ready after that, or it might need a third. We'll go from there once we've got another hour. Okay, so now our dye bath has been cooking for about 2 hours, maybe a little bit over 2 hours. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to remove all of the leaves and just have the liquid left over. And then when we come back, we will add our fabric to this. All right, be right back. All right, so we are ready to finally add our fabric into our dye bath. I've removed, I'd say like 95% of the leaves. You could be thorough and get every single bit of your dye stuff out. I don't think it matters all that much for me personally, so I'm going to leave a few leaves left in there. Some people will fully like sieve their solution through like a cheesecloth, but as far as I've seen, it's a matter of personal preference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and lower the socks into the solution. The solution is still warm, but it's not boiling hot anymore, but I am still going to be lowering it in with tongs. Right. So I've lowered them in, and then I'm just giving them a good little stir just to start to get that material worked into the fibers. And what I'm seeing so far is looking pretty good. I'm gonna be leaving these overnight, but I will give you guys a sort of sneak preview right now. So it's looking, and again, this could change overnight, but it's looking like we're going to have a very vibrant yellow dye from these. So what I'm gonna do, as I said, is I'm gonna leave these overnight. I'm gonna put the lid on this just so that it keeps a little bit of the warmth longer. And then tomorrow I will come in, rinse these, and then I will show you guys what our final product is after we have rinsed and dried these socks. Okay, so it has been sitting in our dye bath overnight, and I am really excited about the color that we're working with so far. We've got a really vivid yellow. Let me just bring it a little closer to you guys. So we've got a really nice yellow. Now I expect some of this to wash out when I rinse these, but color-wise, it's looking pretty good. Okay, so I'm just gonna set this here. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and throw these into the washing machine, and with a light detergent. There is a detergent that I will put up right here called Synthrapol that is especially for washing fabrics after they've been dyed. It sort of like sets everything. So you can use that, but I have also just used regular detergent, and it just like tends to pull a little bit more color out, but either is fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and wash these with a little bit of Synthrapol, and then I will dry them, and then when we come back, we'll have our final product. All right. Okay, so I have just pulled the socks out of the dryer, and we are still looking at a very vivid yellow. I'm very happy with how bright this turns out. Yellow is a pretty common dye to be able to achieve with plants, but very rarely does it stay this bright, and I'm really interested to see how long it stays this bright and whether repeated washes are gonna dull it, or if this is actually a pretty solid color. But I'm very happy with the way it turned out. I look forward to doing more experiments with this dye in the future, and I hope that you guys are able to replicate this experiment in your own homes and with your own practice. All right, thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye.